Hi there. Thanks for coming along to our breakfast event to showcase some of our micro-learning speakers around project and program management. We're not quite ready yet. We're still sorting things out, getting the technology up and running so we can all be ready for you. So in the meantime, have a look at a few of these snippets and it'll give you a bit of a taster as to some of the other micro-learning modules that we've got, some of the speakers we've got coming up in store over the next 12 months. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Projects in the OGC world, in MSP and Prince world, exist to deliver outputs. And what do we mean by it? PMI calls them deliverables. It's a thing. Usually it means you can have your photograph taken next to it. You know, if you can tap it, it's an output.
Risks and issues on programs.
So when you've got a whole load of things on your risk register, have a look through them and go, well, what are the causes that we have? What are the big answers to lots of these things? But it's useful to say, am I looking at an effect or a cause when you're looking at the risk register?
Oh, hi. Thanks for coming back. We're still getting the cameras ready. We're still getting everyone positioned so we can do the broadcast really well for you. So look, have a look at a few more of these micro-learning snippets. So you get a bit of a taster of what's in store. Again, talk to you soon. Thanks for hanging by. Cheers.
What are the benefits of vaccinating children against flu? Well, presumably it means the kids don't get flu. They can go to school, their exam scores improve, their education improves. They don't give flu to other kids at school. That's good. That's a benefit. It's a measurable improvement. We can measure the amount of days that kids have off school because they do measure it. We can do this stuff.
A team member may say something like, this new project is negatively affecting our team, and that's not being taken into consideration at all. So an active listener could respond by reflecting back. What I'm hearing you say is this new project will have negative consequences for your team. So I'm not parroting back, I'm reflecting back what I'm hearing in my own words.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much again for joining us. Now, we're just showing you a few of these snippets, so you've got a bit of a taster of what the micro-learning is all about. We've got a couple of presenters coming up shortly to speak to you. It's all sort of around the micro-learning of the project and program managers. So we're still getting the lights all sorted and getting the microphones on and things like that. So just bear with us for a few more moments and you should be good to go, okay? So we'll definitely be seeing you soon. Cheers.
Project, Program and Portfolio Management Maturity Model, P3M3 Maturity Levels.
So at level 1 maturity, which we call awareness, so there's kind of a process awareness, they are kind of the fun places to work, right? Because every project's exciting for them because they've got no idea what's going to happen.
Establishing an enterprise project management office.
One of the key things is spending a lot of time on problem definition, understanding, and obviously the same for projects, right? What are we actually trying to resolve here? Are we all clear? Are we all agreed? It takes a lot of time to do that.
I don't know. Is this the right table? I can't work it out. Look, we're going to be just taking a little bit longer to get this ready. We've got a few cables here that we're not quite sure where they're meant to go. But once we've got those in, we'll be up and running. So look, keep enjoying yourself watching these micro learning snippets. They'll no doubt give you a bit of knowledge around project and program management. So yeah, talk to you soon. Cheers.
Ponder this. We typically divide projects into work packages. We divide programs into projects. There's inevitably an overlap. Should I run a big, complicated project with big, complicated work packages? Or should I run a simple program with specific projects in it? One person's big, complicated work package is another person's simple project. And organizations will make different choices.
Multiple diverse infections.
When they scan your temperature, if it was above 37, something you were a potentially Ebola carrier. Now, the problem is in a country like Sierra Leone, your humidity is hot. We're right in the midst of malaria season. And then you've got huge HIV cases going on as well.
Morena whanau in Wellington. Welcome to the CC Learning networking event on Thursday in June. Oh my gosh, it's a bit cold here in Wellington, but I call it crisp. I say so. I'm broadcasting from central Wellington, where it's very much still dark, and we managed to get Rob and Patrick up. We have people from around the world online via YouTube and LinkedIn joining me with Rob England and Patrick O'Doherty, both in Wellington. Did I do the pronunciation correct there, Patrick? Hopefully I did, so fingers crossed. Kia ora everyone for being up so early for the event, and thank you for Patrick and Rob for joining us this morning. I'd like to do a call out to all those joining us from New Zealand and beyond. Thanks for joining us either as live participants. Well, I guess you're all live, I hope. But we're doing a recorded session as well. So we're going to be sending out recording, and those people no doubt are going to watch it at a more sensible hour than us. So please ask questions via YouTube or the LinkedIn chat. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn channel to get future notifications right into your phone. And feel free to ask a question on YouTube, but you're going to have to have subscribed, okay? So continue the conversations and post messages online and at your workplace. Let's keep the conversation going on about these project concepts and ideas. And it would help us if you shared this event to promote it for next time, okay? So we're taking bookings for the next events as well. So Rob's here today to talk about open IT beyond Agile. So Rob's a consultant at Teal Unicorn, often works in the IT domain, promoting DevOps and exposing the flaws and benefits of service management. In this presentation, he comes full circle by applying the open thinking that has had such success for in business technology to show how do you do IT in the 21st century is the question he's answering. He works alongside Cherry Vu, who is a fantastic speaker and is doing great wonders over in Vietnam. So let me transfer over to Rob. Let's hear from you, Rob.
That's what we do, and that's what has led us to this point. So we, Cherry and I, we use this word open a lot because it's a much bigger concept than agile, which is a much overused word and overworked word these days. And so we talk about open as in opening up the organization and opening up the work, opening up to diversity, opening up to transparency. We're big on making work visible and transparency of decision making, So collaborative, open decision making, open to possibilities and open to the future. Open is this wonderful word that has, and slightly more concretely, but less hippie, we talk about human systems adaptability. So all the stuff around humanistics and making the workplace a more human place to work, and systems thinking, particularly understanding complexity and the implications of complexity and failure, and adaptability, which is agility. Agile is still in there, and resilience, combination of agility and resilience. And so that human systems adaptability is sort of open. And then we particularly focus that on management, because we understand that management is the key to unlocking new ways of working, better ways of working, is to change how we manage the work and how managers think. So that's where we work primarily. I am an IT guy, as you said, Scott. I still do a lot of work in the DevOps space, and in management of IT, in service management, more broadly, governance and management of IT has always been my thing too. So it sort of seemed right to come full circle. We're having this wonderful success in Vietnam with applying these open ideas to organizations, large and small, from 25,000 people to 5 people, our clients, and they all have remarkable results, all because we get to the management. We are operating at the management level. So I thought it seemed appropriate to come full circle and apply those ideas to IT, hence open IT. And so for the rest of this year, I'm running a thing online that people can join in for free, to break this down into all the pieces that make up open in the context of IT and bring that together. And so as I see it at the moment, I will be influenced through this year with discussions to people who join in. So it's this idea of growing this, but as I see it at the moment, there's 3 main aspects to open IT, right? There's liberation of the people and the work, giving people the authority to do their own damn job, and giving them the autonomy and the empowerment and the capability to get the work done, and giving them the capacity and the headroom to get the work done. So liberation, and then adaptability, that concept again of agility plus resilience. So agility is all hot and everyone's talking about agile, but we need to think a lot more about resilience as well and bring the 2 concepts together to be adaptable to the constantly changing circumstances that we work in IT now, and stop trying to build IT for a stable world, which is what's killing us. And so liberation and adaptability, and finally flow, and creating flow of work, because we're lucky that IT work, once we get past the creative development bit, the pipeline to production is quite linear and bounded. And so we can use all those concepts of lean thinking and creating flow and value stream thinking to look at IT in a way that we can't do in a lot of areas of business. So liberation, adaptability, and flow, I think, are the 3 primary areas of how we change how we do IT for the 21st century. Those are the 3 areas of focus to move us forward. So there is some primary, there's lots underneath that, but people can have a look on the Teal Unicorn website if they want to dig into it more, or talk to me to reach out. But that's the guts of it. And so I think we are finding that if you treat people nicely, if you treat them like adults, and if you create an environment that is built on the assumption that nothing is going to stay the same for very long at all, and that change is the permanent state we work in. It's not a thing that happens to us, it's the permanent state we work in. And if you then truly understand the value stream and the system, the flow system, then those three areas are what will take us forward into actually functioning properly in this century. How was that for the elevator pitch, Scott? Was I brief enough today? I do tend to go on when I get excited about these things.
Elevator pitch. I like that idea. I've got a few questions that I've managed to scribble down in reference to this. Now,
a very slow-moving elevator. That was still.
So now we're joined by Patrick, and I wanted to ask a question quickly, and I'm going to turn it to Patrick and say, Patrick, what was it like? You're going to talk shortly about the IRD transformation program. What was the management environment like in that program? Did any of the stuff that Rob's talked about around flexibility and agility and things like that, were they reflected in that project you're about to tell us about?
Yeah, I was going to say, even though, what Rob spoke about, I guess a lot of the phraseology, etc., that he mentioned might be kind of relatively new. A lot of it sounded extremely familiar with the experience that we had. When we kicked off the program kind of officially back kind of 2013, 2014, one of the big taglines was transparency. Transparency was absolutely key, and that was going way back to kind of pre-business case around saying, look, we know this is going to be a big deal, both for organizationally across government, to just get a business case over the line for the amount of kind of investment we were talking about. We had to be quite open and transparent, both internally and with ministers. So we talk a lot about the kind of start of our project being like, we took 2 years to get a business case together, but we wrote the business case in about 6 weeks. And those other kind of 22 months was around coming up with a vision, getting the organization on board, getting not just the vision, but then a big conversation about how are we going to actually deliver this organizationally, and then kind of, for want of a better word, kind of selling that dream to government, being a big government agency, going to require a big investment from government, but it was both the government of the day, but also the opposition, because we recognise, look, there's a fair chance that if this is a 6, 7, 8 year program, there's going to be change of government somewhere in the middle. So we don't want to go back and try to resell again halfway through. So we made sure both sides were kind of fully on board, and lo and behold, in the middle of our program, we absolutely did have a change of government, but it was kind of a non-event from our perspective. And then similarly, one of the big parts of our transformation, and it wasn't necessarily a nice part of it, but because we introduced a lot of efficiency into the organization, then we ended up with a smaller organization at the end. And again, that's, in any organization, that's quite tricky when people who've been with the organization for a long time leave and basically don't get replaced. But again, we were fully transparent right up front around what we were doing. We were moving the organization from being very much compliance driven to being very much customer focused. It sounded a bit funny from a tax office saying you're going to be customer friendly, but it was very much very open, very transparent, and it got the people in the organization on board. And even again up front, lots of lots of press, lots of commentary around, the amount of money we were spending, the fact that we were using kind of consultants and overseas organizations. But at the end of the day, kind of close to 80% of the actual delivery team were still inland revenue full-time staff. Yes, we absolutely got some experts in, but it was the organization that delivered this. And the only way we were able to get people to buy into that was exactly as Rob said, just the transparency and, in a lot of ways, that freedom and allowing people to use their expertise and get on with doing what needed to be done.
Yeah, I think something Rob mentioned yesterday was that you get to a point where you've got a decision to make, and not everyone has to agree with it. And I'm sure reducing an organization does have some downsides. There are some people who don't like that idea. The idea of maybe either people losing their jobs or a reduction in headcount so people have to do more work. Either way, this is the object of the project. And I think, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, Rob, but I think that it's not about getting consensus. It's not consensus with the decision, but consensus that this has to happen, and this is the way it's going to happen.
Consent.
Yeah, consent. That's
people
right.
People may not agree, but they consent. It was very well managed at Inland Revenue. I don't know if you know Patrick, but I was kind of off to the side around a lot of this without being involved. For a long time, I've worked with Inland Revenue for 15 years on and off. And it was very well managed in terms of the human. Of course, there was a lot of grief and pain and people were unhappy about it. That's unavoidable, but it was well managed, and the consent was there. People all understood, and it was extraordinarily well executed. I don't know if people, even in New Zealand, let alone around the world, quite realise what went on in Inland Revenue over those 6 years, Patrick. I mean, people are like, yeah, lots of money, but the transformation was remarkable, and the potential downside was considerable. If it had all gone belly up, it would have been catastrophic. And so I was watching from the sidelines all the way through and fascinated, and it was an extraordinary execution that you guys carried it off and made it happen as well as it did was quite amazing.
No, I mean, thank you, and I think it's absolutely, again, you're echoing a lot of things that we spoke about internally around, we had that vision of where we wanted to take the organization, and absolutely there was some bumps along the road, and yes, we talk about the downsizing, but there was a lot of technology challenges, notwithstanding the fact that we had the Kaikara earthquake about 2 months out from our first major release, so we kind of lost our building, and that exposed us to a whole range of other kind of back office technology issues, trying to work remotely, etc., that we hadn't anticipated. And then to your point, Scott, around decisions, so one of our biggest releases, our fourth release, was at Easter 2020, which was about 6 weeks, or not even 6 weeks, probably 3 to 4 weeks after we went into a level 4 lockdown in New Zealand.
Right.
So, we had what at the time was planned to be a 7-day, 24/7 kind of cutover, because it was a KiwiSaver cutover, so it was massive data migration from multiple legacy systems and reconciliations, etc. And with KiwiSaver, you're talking about billions of dollars of transactions. Actually, I think overall there was over $1 trillion of financial transactions we had to migrate, and we had about 280 odd people we'd planned on being in the office over that 7-day period, and we had to make a decision within 48 hours. Well, do we go live or do we not go live? And I often joke about it now, that we changed our mind about 6 times in that 48-hour period, because it was, we're ready. Technically, we're ready. The team is ready. We can, we're ready to go. But if it goes wrong, and as often, with every big release, we always plan for stuff going wrong, because it always does. It was like, if stuff goes badly wrong and we're in the middle of a level 4 lockdown, well, people will look at us and say, what were you thinking trying to take this massive release in the middle of a lockdown? Were you really crazy? So we kind of vacillated a lot. But again, what it ultimately came down to was a really open conversation with a lot of the major fund providers across New Zealand
Right.
around saying, look, they absolutely were totally swamped when we first went into lockdown, but people trying to figure out, okay, can I access my KiwiSaver? What can I use it for, etc. Just really worried about what was happening. And they said, look, it's kind of died down a little bit. And, ultimately we got to the point of, if we don't go now, the situation in 6, 9, 12 months could be a whole lot worse. And we kind of got to the point of, well, if we go and we can make it successfully, then we'll be in a much better position to be able to respond to whatever happens next. So ultimately we ended up going, and touch wood, it all went seamlessly. We ended up doing, pivoting the whole thing and validating it in within about a week, and we did the whole thing remotely. We did have about 7 people who had to go into the office at various points through the week to do some manual stuff, but for the most part it was, we pivoted from being fully on site to being fully remote in the space of a couple of weeks. And as I said, touch wood, it all went well, and it really did set us up for the next kind of 2 years in terms of when, as a program, we even pivoted a little bit to doing a lot more COVID response, and we still had a couple of releases to do, but the foundation we had around the COVID response really helped us in that regard. But really critical decision. But again, it was exactly back to Rob's earlier point. The only reason we were able to have those conversations with the fund providers was because we'd set up those relationships. We were very transparent. They knew exactly what was coming, and we kind of had a very big conversation with them and saying, look, if this thing does go south, we need your support. We don't need you sitting on the sidelines throwing stones or pointing fingers. We need you in there helping us if this, if things go bad. And they were fully up to that. But again, it was all about the transparency and the relationships we'd built up over years with those people, and it kind of paid dividends.
I've got another question. Oh, sorry, Rob, you go.
I was going to say, we talk about agility, right? And about to be agile, you break it up into many small steps and iterative execution and so on. But one of the biggest areas of people bending their heads, one of the biggest areas of growth and thinking at the moment, as far as I can see, is the reality that in the world we're forced to big bang step changes sometimes, especially in hard things, not software. But if you're going to build a hydroelectric dam, then you can't do it incrementally and small. So real world project management still deals with great big lumps, and how do you be iterative and agile about that? And so Inland Revenue were in the situation where this aging system just had to be totally replaced, and that was an incredibly hard political decision to take, and an incredibly brave one, especially in government. And so, for a project management audience, I think it's particularly interesting that it was, there was a lot of agile ways of thinking and developing it, but basically this was 4 big bangs, wasn't it, Patrick? And it was executed as classic big bang, and yet at the same time quite progressive modern organizational thinking went into how do we execute these big bangs. So I think it was a masterclass. Personally, I'm quite impressed with, and I'd quite like the world to know that we didn't bankrupt the country. We completely ripped one tax system out and put another one in overnight, and we're all still,
Ross, and to pay tax, unfortunately, but
the Australians taught me the burning cars index. So Centrelink in Australia 20 years ago had the burning cars index, which is how long can this system be down before we have burning cars in the streets, right? And absolutely the burning cars clock was ticking every one of those 4 big bangs. Yeah. And yet they pulled it off. I mean, I am in awe, actually. I'm really impressed with it.
I mean, one comment, I know I've got a few more questions, Scott, and we're probably going off script a little bit, but
that's right. That's good. It's good stuff.
Exactly your point, Rob. I mean, for a project management audience, certainly the big takeaway for me on the overall program and the transformation of the whole organization is, you got to find your own method. Talking about saying we're going to be waterfall or we're going to be agile or we're going to be iterative or whatever the case is is great. You need to understand all of those different dimensions, but you need to then figure out what works for you as an organization. And Rob, exactly to your point, because we often and we mostly talk about the system replacement of the core tax system in the inland revenue transformation context, but we also change all of our back office. Our core finance, HR, payroll system was changed. We put in new information management, new enterprise search, new public-facing static website, new analytics platform. We totally redesigned the organization. We're now organizationally aligned by customer segment. So what was our service delivery arm is now made up into a business-focused customer service division and an individuals-focused division. At the end of it all, I've spent the last year kind of setting up a team what's called strategic architecture, which is effectively blending our technology innovation with our business strategy team. So, because we recognize, to your point, the world isn't standing still, and now the strategy of inland revenue going forward is going to be large, particularly any major shifts, is going to be largely driven by technology and digital innovation. So, we use the analogies of the airline industry in terms of saying, look, and pretty crudely we said, look, there was no airline executive sitting in an office 20 years ago saying, wouldn't it be great if we could check into flights on a mobile phone? It was progressive iterations of technology which allowed you to check in on a kiosk, and then somebody said, well, maybe we can make the kiosk a little bit smaller and build it up. So it's progressive iterations of technology has fundamentally changed the airline industry. And we see inland revenue and more broadly government services in exactly the same vein around its technology innovation going forward is what's going to drive major shifts and major changes. And that's the clarification there. It's not your old school IT operations kind of driving the bus and coming up with big technology solutions. It's around understanding innovative use of technology and how that can be applied to your organization. But as you said, we often see organizations get overly focused on, well, we're an agile organization or we're waterfall and that's the way we have to deliver everything. And it's like, well, no, you got to understand all of those different dimensions, but then apply it to your organizational context and figure out what's going to work for you, and not be too blinded by the zealots and the manuals and the books and everything else to say you have to do things a certain way. Find what works for you and go with it.
That actually leads on to a question I had, and that is, Agile's getting a bit of a bad rap at the moment in some sectors. There have been some people talking about Agile as leading to a chaotic environment, and one side of me says that's the zealots, the purists saying everything must be run in this particular way. There's no reason why it can't be integrated with existing governance and organizational structures or methods of portfolio management and things like that. Rob, talk to me about this. What's the deal?
Oh dear.
Think about it first.
Yeah. No. The question's fine. I was like, oh dear. I'm an agile zealot in the sense that I think ultimately agility is fundamental and foundational to how we run an organization. And the big transformation in inland revenue was to give them the ability to be agile going forward, to give them the ability to break things down into small incremental steps and decouple all the pieces and generally give them a foundation to be a more agile organization was the primary motivator right back when it was being mooted. And so I'm a zealot in the sense that this is the future. This is how we work. I absolutely won't compromise on that. But the thing that's called agile that we see out in the wild is often a horrific thing, and generally, and is what's causing all this backlash. And I'm absolutely certain that the reason for that is because people are told to be agile, but management doesn't change at all. So, I characterized a whole series of my engagements a while back as we told them to DevOps and they're not DevOpsing. What's wrong with them? Can you fix them? And it's like, I don't think they're the problem. People cannot work in modern ways unless management changes how they manage people to allow them to work in modern ways. And we absolutely, that's what gives us the success that we have at Teal Unicorn, is because we focus on not changing how people work, but changing how people manage. Because changing how people work is actually pretty easy once you change the system of management. And a lot of that went on, Patrick. I did watch the cultural transformation of management at Inland Revenue as much as the transformation of work and technology.
Yeah. Oh, look, and that's why I say before, I like the phrase you use in your opening, get a better picture around open IT or open organizations, because I think it, Scott, to your point, it takes the agile methodology and what I would call the confusion around the agile methodology versus the kind of agile organization. It kind of takes it a little bit off the table because, as I said, I think Rob is absolutely right, and I certainly wasn't having a go at the Robert his agile zealotry at all. It's more around how it's applied in organizations. I think is not right, and it's more. It becomes more about, okay, well, the manual tells me I need to do things in this way. I now need to change my little part of the organization to do things that way. And oh my God, it's not working. Why isn't it working? It's like, well, because one, exactly to Rob's point, the organization hasn't actually changed. You're trying to change one cog in a very, very big wheel, and that's always going to create friction and skipping gears and everything else. And then separately is, you can't, and I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, I don't think anybody would say you can take an agile book and apply it kind of verbatim to an organization and expect to be agile in the next 24 hours.
I love that meme that says, I don't know anything about your job, but my book says you're doing it wrong, right? and yeah, totally. So we're all about just letting people figure out how to do the work.
And that's what's, again, that's to Rob's point, what we certainly worked on in the IR context was saying, okay, well, some of these pieces, like Rob said, the core mainframe replacement, you can't agilely replace that. Can't do increments every 2 weeks or releases every 2 weeks. That has to be a big bang, and there's no way around it because of one, the way it was designed 30 odd years ago, and the volume of data that had to be shifted from point A to point B. In the context of, you got to have a continuation of service as you're doing all of these major changes. Well, that again, we said from a release context, that was kind of your traditional waterfall. But the way again we did the kind of what you would call the design was very iterative. It wasn't a give me 200 pages of requirements, I'll go away into a dark room for 6 months, build something, and come back to you, and we'll argue about why it's wrong. It was very much a iterative process of going through, building some stuff that's going to work or it's not going to work, and so it was very much a lot of, we used the word iterative as opposed to agile because we didn't want to get hung up on that, but it was very iterative. It was very involved. It was very user centric. There was a lot of customer engagement as well, so it was very much agile in the organization sense in that one. But then, when we talk about the the public facing website and developing content for that was much more skewed towards what I would call your traditional kind of agile delivery method, and weekly and fortnightly sprints, etc., and tribes and groups and that way, because that was much more attuned to delivering in that way, and people we had were much more averse to delivering in that way. So it was very much we kind of coined the phrase of a BT method in terms of we found what worked for us in various guises, and the overall program was multiple different projects or even programs, and the kind of delivery method, for want of a better word, was subtly different in every one of them, but collectively we absolutely had the kind of mantra and the support organization, and not just organization but ministerially as well, around this is the way we need to operate to actually get this thing over the line, and everybody just got on with it.
Very cool.
I think it's important to make for people out there to understand that it had to be big bang because it wasn't agile. It had to be big bang because it was 30 years of highly spaghettified development, 20th century development, that prevented it being replaced in any way other than a big bang, and hopefully going forward, that Inland Revenue have a platform now where bits and pieces can be changed in a much more incremental way in the future, right? If need be.
Oh, I mean, and I think case in point of that is our COVID response. So we take our small business cash flow scheme, which we delivered from ministers having a conversation in their office to passing legislation to having money in bank accounts in 18 days. So that's exactly the Rob point. That's the policy agility that we had as one of our catchphrases right up front. That's the agility we were looking for. We never expected to get it down to that time frame, but again, it's important to understand that the way we were able to do that on a number of occasions during COVID was because we had basically our business architects who understood the technology sitting down with our policy folks saying, well, these are the components we've got, these are the design patterns. If you write the legislation in this way, we can deliver you a product in the next 48 hours. If you do your traditional way of coming up with a beautiful piece of policy and then telling us that we need to implement it, it'll probably take you 6 months. So new ways of working. This is a technology, if you want to be agile, this is how you're going to write it. You will get probably 80-85% of the outcome you're looking for. And that, and you then got the trade-off too. Do you want it to be a perfect piece of legislation, or do you want something that's going to be customer centric really, really quickly? It was a pretty easy decision, but exactly the right point. It was the work up front that allowed us to then be able to have some of those conversations and be agile in terms of the delivery.
So effectively, it sounds like the changes implemented an open way of working up the chain as well as on the chain itself, which is pretty impressive. So you heard it here first, though. A new word for the lexicon: spaghettified. That is officially a term now used by Rob and now for everyone henceforth to describe technology that has built up over 30 years. So I'm glad to see we've increased the spaghettified world. Now let's move on. So just so you know, these breakfast events, they're based around our lessons library. So we've interviewed project and program experts, project managers to create the largest depository of project lessons. We're capturing all these lessons so you don't have to. We've got some experts today that are now contributing to that library. It's available for you to use within your organisation. We believe that oral and visual storytelling is the best way to establish a common understanding and culture. Now, Patrick is going to talk to us about IRD. He's probably going to have to you probably talked about a lot of your topics already. But Patrick's a lead at the digital transformation and strategy and architecture. So as you've heard, New Zealand IRD Department of Education, Inland Revenue Department embarked on a transformation program to modernise its outdated technology, simplify the tax process, and improve the customer experience. It involved implementing new IT systems and adopting these agile methodologies, upskilling staff, and providing a more personalised service. So it's resulted in significant improvements in tax compliance, service delivery, and cost savings, while receiving positive feedback from customers, staff, and around the world. I'm aware that the world was watching, particularly afterwards, but probably in the middle as well, I suspect, if they weren't too distracted by COVID. So let's transition over to Patrick.
Thank you, Scott. And you're absolutely right. I've spoken a lot about already, and just in the conversation with Rob. So that was really useful. But I'll take us back a little bit to the start. So the summary was, we had a lot of aging technology. We'd back in kind of 2012, 2013, we'd come off the back of two quite tricky programs. One in the child support space and one in a student loans area. The challenge with those was they both independently ended up taking probably a couple of years longer than what they had originally planned, and that resulted in budget increases of anywhere in the tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. So, long story short, the government had kind of had enough of the challenges and the inability or the inagility or unagility of inland revenue to be able to actually deliver new policy and new changes. So we needed a fundamentally different way of doing things. We had a couple of attempts at putting a business case forward around replacing the aging technology. They kind of fell a bit flat, and we ultimately landed on a top to bottom transformation of the whole organization and moving from what we had become, which was a compliance driven organization, i.e., trying to find out different ways that people were avoiding paying tax, to what we ultimately became, which was a customer centric organization. And that customer centricity is what kind of drove a lot of the subsequent changes in inland revenue. So in terms of highlights of where we've got to, so in 2012, the revenue take that we were managing from a tax perspective was about $48 billion. In 2022, so 10 years later, it was just over 100 billion. So we've kind of, in a commercial sense, we've doubled revenue in the space of 12 years. I alluded to it before, the organization is now about 30% smaller than what it was back in those days. We are, anywhere between 98 to 99% digital. So all transactions, information, data going in and out of inland revenue, about 98% of that is digital, and that includes all stuff like payments and returns and information flows, etc. And within that, just over half of those digital transactions come through what we call natural systems, i.e., they don't actually touch an inland revenue system until it comes through to our back-end processing engine. So, we've got accountants running on accounting software, stuff like MYB and Xero. We've got large employers running on payroll software. All of that is now automatically connected up into inland revenue, to the point that, as I said, about just over half of all transactions that come into inland revenue originate in software that wasn't created by inland revenue. And for those in New Zealand, we often link the kind of emerging success story of a company like a Henry, which is growing massively over the last couple of years. That was largely enabled. They're able to do what they're doing, able to grow in their market because of a lot of the work that we've done around building what we call a digital ecosystem at inland revenue. And that was exactly the vision early on in terms of inland revenue, government agency. We're never going to be able to have the kind of research, development, innovative budgets to drive innovation longer term. Yes, we've got a big chunk of cash for the transformation program, but beyond that, we're never going to be able to drive the innovation. So we want to be able to create an environment where other organizations can actually drive that innovation and agility as well. And we feel like we're reasonably successful in that. Scott alluded to, so the program itself delivered across kind of 5-ish major releases, so from 2017 to 2022. So 2017 was our first major release, which was GST. It was Waitangi weekend, so February 2017. That came off the back of the Kaikara earthquake in New Zealand, which was about 4 months prior. And that resulted in us losing our kind of main building in Wellington for a number of weeks. And what that highlighted for us was that our kind of back office or our workforce or workspace technology primarily was inadequate. So we had a limit of 500 people that could work remotely. So literally, if you didn't get online and kind of dial in or connected by 7 a.m. in the morning during that period, then you couldn't get on for the whole day. You couldn't work because we had no mechanism of working remotely. We did have a crude version of webmail, which our security policies meant that you couldn't upload or download any attachments. So lo and behold, that resulted in lots of people using Hotmail and Yahoo and Gmail to email stuff around. So that was a bit of a challenge. So that was a bit of an eye-opener beyond the kind of core story of replacing the tax system, around saying, look, we got to get our back office squared away. And that was a big catalyst for us actually doing that. And that then resulted in, when we did get to, if you fast forward to 2020, and as I alluded to before, we went into level 4 lockdown in New Zealand a few weeks out from one of our, from our fourth major release being KiwiSaver. It allowed us to actually pivot and, be fully operational remotely, at the flick of a switch effectively. And and then allowed us to, within about 3 weeks, we were able to do a pretty major cutover almost entirely remotely and do all of the work remotely with a couple of very minor exceptions. So that was, again, Rob mentioned around the agility of the organization and, the fact that you got to be able to respond to things. Well, we often look back and think the Kaikoura earthquake and the way we responded to that actually allowed us to then be ready for when the pandemic hit and ultimately be able to not just continue delivering the program, but actually enable Inland Revenue to be a big player in the overall COVID response. So the program said delivered across 5 releases, 2017 to 2022. The program, the last major release was child support in October 2021, and then we spent probably the next 6-8 months from that point through till June of last year, June of 2022, when the program officially finished. Spent that time effectively shutting down the program as we kind of removing the scaffolding and preparing the organization to continue to take the capability we've now delivered forward. And we're now in the middle of developing, kind of unofficially kind of post-BT strategy. We've now got all this capability technology-wise, but more importantly people-wise and ways of working. And the big trick now is how do we double down on that change, and how do we continue to take the organisation forward and not just Inland Revenue as the revenue agency organisation for New Zealand, but how do we take a lot of the learnings, both, as I said, capability-wise that we've now got in terms of assets, but also the learnings of how we've done it, and use that to help other government organisations moving forward. So that's kind of a very brief summary of the BT story, but obviously there's lots of detail we could go into. But I think some of the key tenets around transparency, the way the organisation was managed, the way I guess the vision and the leadership from the top down, not just from Naomi, who was just the chief executive, but also across multiple ministers, and the way we kind of manage both outwards and inwards. So one other story I will mention before I wrap up was, again, back to the whole agility and transparency piece, was when we went live with our first release in February 2017, we actually had a big backlash from tax agents. And that was, they were surprised by the level of change we introduced off the back of that major release. And our initial reaction was, well, we've been communicating with you for about 2 years and we told you this stuff was coming, and so we were expecting you were going to be ready. Their response was, well, you send us so much stuff on a weekly and a daily basis that we actually ignore most of it. So what that highlighted was that we kind of phrased that we had an overinflated view of our understanding of our customers. So we knew we had to take a bit more time to actually understand who our customers were, and not just how they interacted with us, but actually how they wanted to interact with us. So, moving forward, we ended up embedding a number of tax agents within the program and helped them actually design some of the future services. But we were open enough to say, look, we didn't quite get it wrong, but we certainly didn't have an appreciation, or enough of an appreciation for the tax agents in terms of what they were going through. And then lastly, in terms of transparency, so everything we did from our business case, including the financials, we published externally. So we did monthly ministerial reports to the minister, which was all published on our website. All of our various audits and QA reports, not just the good bits, but the bits about what we needed to do better, were all published externally. And what that resulted in was a lot of the press and the public perception, like early on, around, I can't believe Inland Revenue is spending $1 billion on a new IT system. It all went away because there was no news story. What we did, yes, there was absolutely a big price tag on it. But when you look at the fact that the benefit profile we had, which goes out to 2025, 26, we'd actually delivered the business case benefits by about 2018, and we still had another 4 years of the program and about 6 or 7 years of the actual benefits profile to run. So, the journalists that were keen on understanding what we were doing early on and kind of pointing fingers, quickly realized that we were answering all our questions, we were making all the information available, we were hiding absolutely nothing, and I said even when things didn't go 100% right, we were quite open about it, and effectively there wasn't a news story. So the transparency across the board, both internally through government but also publicly, was quite a key success factor for us. So that's probably all I will mention from an overview perspective, but because I think we've touched on a couple of the key points already in the conversation with Rob and Scott. But I'll hand it back to you, Scott, and happy to take any more questions you may have.
Thanks, Patrick. That's pretty cool stuff, isn't it? Are you able to provide, I know you provided one example where there was legislation required around COVID. Do you have any other examples that you can link to the transformational change? So something you've done now, or something the IR's done now, which says, we couldn't have done this before, but now we're able to do it.
Probably the single biggest change we've got is what we now call the automatic assessment for individuals. So we're actually right in the middle of it now. So what that's resulted in is for 3.5 million individuals in New Zealand, you don't need to interact with the tax system from a tax return perspective. So we've now got all the information on your income, such that we don't need to ask you to fill in a tax return. So some of you may remember, going back pre-BT, there was what was called the PTS process, our personal tax summary, which was effectively around about this time of the year. You would see these organisations crop up in shopping malls, etc., around the country, saying, "Oh, look, I can get you a tax refund, and for the pleasure of doing that, I will take a nice 20% cut on top of that." Where a lot of people did that, thinking, "Well, it's I wouldn't get it otherwise, so I'm happy to give you a little chunk of that to actually return it." We looked at that and said, well, there's something seriously wrong with that, because one, you as an individual, if you're owed a tax refund, you're entitled to it. So having to then pay 20% of that to another organisation. So fair dues to those PDS providers. They saw a gap in the market and they created a commercial opportunity and made quite a bit of money over many years. We looked at that and said, well, that's wrong, because the environment we've created as a government agency is actually basically doing people out of the money they're entitled to, and it was only as a result of, because we had such a complicated process, that's what kind of created that. What that then led to was, in its early days, a process what we call payday filing, which is effectively the concept of, once an organisation runs a payroll, the information flows automatically through to Inland Revenue. So when you get paid through your normal kind of, I was going to say 9-to-5 job, not that there's many of those kind of remaining anymore. Your normal kind of salaried employee, all of the deductions around PAYE, KiwiSaver, if you've got child support, student loans, all of those deductions, an employer in the previous world had to fill in what was called an employer monthly schedule, which was reconciling all of my payrolls into a calendar month to then send to Inland Revenue. So we've automated all of that, and we've connected up automatically with the payroll software, so that as an employer, one, you don't need to do anything, you just got to run your payroll and everything else magically happens in the background. And what that then means is, for the vast majority of people in New Zealand, we get all of that information within about 48 hours of when a payroll runs. Then the second leg of that stool is, we've done the same thing with all of the financial institutions. So if you got money in the bank, or you got investments or a managed fund or whatever else that kind of earns interest or dividends, we get all of that information on a monthly basis as well. So we have, at any given point in time, as of the end of last month, the full income information for, as I said, close to about 3.5 million individuals in New Zealand. What that then means is, you get to the end of the tax year and we already have all of your income information. In the concept of kind of self-declaration, we still give you the opportunity and say, look, this is the income information we've got. If you think it's wrong, the onus is still on you to tell us. But for all intents and purposes, you've got an automatic assessment, and if you don't tell us anything, we will deem this as being your final tax position. So that happens automatically. So effectively, 3.5 million people do not have to interact with the tax system. Now, that's, we think, pretty awesome. Now, you then take that to the next step and say, well, actually, the next conversation that now enables is, well, why do we have a concept of squaring up at the end of a tax year. Again, a tax year is a concept of, going back 30, 40 years, the revenue agency didn't know how much income you had, so you had to tell us. The only way you could tell it by manually filling a form and then sending it into us. The only way we could deal with all of those forms is by saying, send it all by this date, and then we'll then take the next 6 months trawling through all of the paper forms, and then we'll get back to you and tell you whether we believe you or not, basically. But in a digital world where we've got all of the information, the concept of a tax year effectively is no longer relevant. The information, we could absolutely choose to square you up in September for a year, or even do it for just a monthly period, or even a weekly period if we really wanted to. Now, some of that stuff is quite dramatic, but what it does, it gives us the opportunity to think about some fundamentally different ways about how the tax system is going to work in the future. And what we're now doing is trying to apply some of those logics around some of the other areas which are a little bit more complex, around sole traders, self-employed people, large enterprises, etc. But it's, as I said, the change for individuals is something we certainly couldn't do 4 or 5 years ago that we can now do, and it's now allowing us to kind of move on to some even more fundamental changes.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Can it be replicated? Is this like a one-off? Is this like the ability to execute such a large program? Because there's a whole lot of other departments that have the same sort of scenarios. Can it be done again?
I'm going to say absolutely, and I'm going to say one of my biggest beefs / challenge at the moment is the not made here mentality. I.e., when you talk to, and I'll say organisations because it's not just a government issue. I think it's a broader commercial organisation issue as much as anything else. But it's around and I've heard it so many times in the last 12 months. We really love what you did in land revenue. We think it's absolutely fantastic and it's amazing. It would never work for us. And you can list for reason A, B, C, D, E, for whatever reason, it would never work for us. We talk about the transparency stuff. We talk about, which I didn't mention, but we got multi-year appropriation. We said, look, this thing, to Rob's point, this is a big deal. Once you start it, you can't really stop it. We don't want to end up stopping halfway, because that's going to be even worse than what you are. So we don't want to be having to go through a budget cycle begging for money every 12 months. Aside from the fact that it's going to be really painful, we can't deal with an answer where there's no more money. We have to get all of the money up front. So we've got to get multi-year appropriation. We were very open around our performance measures as an agency during the period of transformation, and said to ministers, look, we're probably going to drop some of our performance measures because transforming the organisation is a really big deal. And yes, our primary goal is still to continue to collect the revenue and continue to pay the social policy benefits that we administer. However, stuff like how quickly we answer the phone, which I know is going to be a bit of a touchy subject, but how quickly we answer the phone, how quickly we respond, some of that stuff we're going to have to compromise for a period of time, because we have to compromise on something. If we're going to transform the organisation, we have to do that. Your ability as a minister to come up with other good ideas and policy changes during that period, it's not going to exist, because we can't be transforming our technology and our organisation, and at the same time you coming in from left field saying, I want to have a new tax or whatever the case is, and say, look, for this period you're not going to have the ability to make new policy changes. If it's within the realm of what we're doing, i.e. we're doing a KiwiSaver release and you've got something you want to do in KiwiSaver, absolutely we can help you deliver those kind of things. But again, an open conversation with ministers. But again, we get the feedback from other agencies saying, oh look, our minister would never go for that. And we come back and say, well, have you asked the question? Because that's what we did. We said, look, we asked the question and we were made it very clear, this is our vision, this is what we need to do. Are you up for it? If you're up for it, these are the things you need to be aware of, the things that you are potentially going to have to compromise. But those conversations need to happen. For this to be, to your point, Scott, to be replicated, these conversations need to happen. There needs to be an openness and a transparency to say, look, this is big, this is hard, but it's definitely worth it if you can get through it.
I wonder whether or not the fact that people say it can't be done and they're not even prepared at that point to ask the question actually means for that particular individual, it can't be done. And actually, those individuals, you need to find the right individual to go, let's give it a try. Let's see, it's plausible that we can do it. And, once you get that change, I don't know. I would like to think it could be done. I would, but I'm just...
I know it's a bit of a long bow to draw, but I'm often reminded about the Michael Jordan quote of, I missed 100% of the shots I didn't take. And it's like, well, if you don't actually try, then you're absolutely never going to transform your organization.
Yeah, dead right.
And similarly, reflecting on our journey, as I said, we get probably 2 and potentially 3 failed attempts at getting a business case over the line. So, it wasn't the perfect plain sailing from we've got an idea to we've delivered at all. And that's the thing. It's the learnings of where we potentially had some false starts, or I don't want to say made some mistakes, but kind of went down one road and realized that was the wrong road to go, or had to react in a certain way. Those, I think, are the learnings around. Well, actually, hopefully, we can help others to not make some of those early mistakes and actually go down the right road to start with. And we often use as the example, say, look, now is the perfect time because you've got a perfect case study sitting here whereby it was successful. So if you want to put the boat out and push the boundaries and do something a little bit different, well, you've got a perfect case study you can point to and say, well, if they did it, why can't we do it?
It's that fear of failure that Rob talked about yesterday, I think, is if you can somehow squash that fear of failure to actually try,
And if you don't start, then you're definitely going to fail. If you do start, well, you might only have a 10% chance of success, but it's 10%. 10% is better than if you don't start, you've got a 0% chance of success.
Yeah.
I think there are 2 key success elements that were there. One was that it really, really, really was end of life. It really, really, the number of places to go were running out real fast. And at the same time, there were some really visionary people, like even with that creaking, archaic old beast, we still had one of the most progressive tax systems in the world. And so there was this genuine culture in inland revenue of wanting to be the best and striving to be. And so that sort of vision and also the desperation was a good combination. So I think other ministries will get into that situation. Like the work I was involved in at Ministry of Social Development, they had a catastrophic system failure, which kind of meant they didn't have a lot of choices about where to go. So yeah, I think yes, absolutely, case study and totally proof point. And then we kind of need to cherry pick the departments that are in that situation where there is someone with vision at the top and they're in a bit of a tight spot. I think they will be the sweet spots where other ministries will come along. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, 100%. Absolutely agree. I think it is. I'm hoping we won't need to have a crisis drive some of the changes, but hopefully there'll be more a case of some near misses will actually drive the change. We want to have
near misses, good. Yeah.
Near misses good.
But never let a good crisis go to waste either.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, look, thank you so much for coming along. So a recording of this live stream will be made available to you along with a request for you to provide feedback about the event. Feel free to share this link with others. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. We'll have Simon Castle from Mott MacDonald in Manchester presenting on projects from the UK. Thanks for coming. Look forward to seeing you at a future event. Ka kite whanau. Cheers.
Yeah.